This podcast is brought to you by Prism Brain Mapping, a revolution in understanding human behaviour. Move away from the norm. In our last podcast, I talked about COVID-19 and how the extraordinary power of our brains and this amazing thing called neuroplasticity can help us undergo substantive change. Many of you have contacted us recognising that the story of Peter's battle with cerebral palsy was very emotive, but also wanting more information on how they can start the change process, or perhaps embed the change, or even just have someone to challenge and support them as they adjust to the new norm. This, for me, all points to how coaching can assist in times of change. Now, I'm delighted to have Ian Davies, one of our Prism coaches, with me today to explore coaching in this context. Good morning, Ian. How are you?
Hi, Alex. Great to be with you again today. I'm fine, thanks. Starting to get used to being back in the UK. As you know, I've been based in Yangon in Myanmar for the last 8 years, but we decided to come back to the UK in late March for a while due to the COVID situation, but hoping to get back to Yangon as soon as we can.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Excellent. And how are you finding the world of learning and development currently?
Well, it's interesting. It's quite a challenging time, I think, isn't it? I think almost everyone involved in learning has had to make a big shift to virtual and online methods. Although I've seen a few posts recently on LinkedIn with social distance sort of trainings now starting again, which is good. We've started being running more and more virtual offerings, especially with the coaching side of things.
Oh, that's really good. So before we talk about your coaching journey, just sort of summarize what coaching is to you. What does coaching mean for you?
Well, I think there's countless definitions of coaching, and I'm not going to look into those. But for me, I think it's an opportunity to work with individuals and teams more closely, to help people, I suppose, explore the future, to support them setting goals that motivate them, and most importantly, to help them to take action. Coaching is all about future and it's all about action.
So tell me about your journey. How did you first become interested in being a coach?
Well, I've been involved in L&D for over 20 years now, I think. I started working with young people developing soft skills back in the 90s, before sort of moving into organisational development world. I think without knowing it, coaching was always a style that I was using, asking more questions to participants, helping people find their own answers. And we're real fans of experiential learning. We do a lot of experiential learning on our training programs, and it's one of our areas of speciality. Now, I knew some other colleagues who were working in coaching field, you being one of them, and the fact that it enables you to work with individuals and teams more closely really appealed to me. A lot of our work is in the design and delivery of learning programs, sort of working closely with HR departments.
Right.
But quite often we have less input after the courses are finished. You run a course, you don't see the participants, you don't have much contact with the participants afterwards as the HR departments take over on the performance management side of things.
Yes.
So coaching allows us to work really closely with people, and you can see those actions taking place week by week, which is, it's really motivating.
No, that's really, really interesting. And so I remember talking to you about coaching, probably 5-10 years ago. So, So where are you now in your coaching journey?
Well, I decided to move down an accredited coaching pathway back in 2017. So I trained initially with an organisation called the Neuro Leadership Institute. They have a program called the Brain-Based Coaching Program. And then over the last 3 years, I've gained a lot more experience. And back in February this year, I became accredited with the International Coaching Federation, or ICF, as it's known, as an associate certified coach. So things are moving forward. So I'm learning all the time.
Excellent. So tell me about the different aspects of the course.
Okay, looking back, the initial training was a 3-day face-to-face course in Singapore. That was the sort of closest area that we could access from Yangon, although they're run worldwide. Really active, engaging, very neuroscience-based, which really appealed to me after working with Prism as well. And it just seemed like a really good fit. So that was followed by a 4-month sort of virtual and peer learning program, practicing the skills, gaining feedback. And the course is ICF accredited, so International Coaching Federation accredited, which means it meets those sort of international standards and ethics, and it counts towards becoming accredited if you wish to. And therefore, I made the decision to start working towards that accreditation In 2018, yeah, sort of mid 2018.
Right. And so the accreditation's important to you. So why did you decide to go down that route?
Well, it's a learning journey, isn't it? As a trainer, I've always focused my energy on helping other people to develop. And, this was an opportunity to up my skills and learn something new. I think it's the same with managers and leaders. They spend all their time developing teams and their businesses, and they often forget about themselves. And the ICF accreditation, it also gives credibility and to follow a recognised sort of professional process.
Yes.
I will, however, say that there are a number of other well-established coaching bodies worldwide. ICF is just one. And also, I think, it's important to say that great coaches don't necessarily need to be qualified. I know some great, some outstanding professional coaches around the world who've never been formally trained. But for me, accreditation was the route I wanted to take.
Right. Okay. And that's so true. I mean, like you, I know some coaches that do not have recognised qualifications, but I would class them as absolutely superb in their coaching style and the way that they coach. So I think that's a really good point. What was involved in the accreditation?
Initially, I had to complete the ICF accredited course, as we said, to ensure the training followed the required ethics and standards. From there, I sort of continued to coach people. And with the ACC level, you have to create a portfolio with a minimum of 100 hours, I think it is, of coaching. You complete a recorded performance evaluation and an online knowledge assessment. Plus, you have to work over a 3-month period. You have to work with a mentor coach, a more experienced mentor coach, and get 10 hours of mentoring. So it's quite an involved process.
Sounds very involved indeed. So what did you find were the biggest challenges?
Interesting. So let's think. I think one big thing during the initial training was actually being a student again. I know it sounds really silly, but I'm so used to working in front of people that suddenly becoming a participant again was actually quite a stretch. I remember arriving early. So the training took place in Singapore. I remember arriving quite early to the hotel in Singapore, grabbing a coffee and waiting for the day to begin. And I was actually quite nervous. I got a bus from where I was staying. I got a sort of bus to the hotel. And I was actually quite nervous, thinking, I hope they don't do any of those icebreakers or those kind of games, which, we run with some of our participants. And it really gave me a fresh insight into, how our participants might feel and the importance of putting people at ease. And
Yes.
they did a really good job at that, actually. And I think it was also about being present, lots of active participation, stuff that I love. And you had to be really open to learning by doing. It wasn't a fixed process. It wasn't delivered. it's not about delivering coaching like a robot. It's about engaging with people, creating rapport, jumping out of your comfort zone, and also getting instant feedback, which I think, it was and it is quite scary at times. But I think getting that instant feedback is the best way to learn quite quickly.
Indeed. So how were you stretched throughout the course?
There was a lot of personal learning. I think for me to be an effective coach, you do need to have been coached before yourself, to fully understand the process. And I'd never been formally coached before. I'd had informal coaching conversations with people, but never been through a sort of formal coaching program as a coachee. And I just don't think you can't learn coaching from a book, a video, or a lecture. I think you have to practice it. And throughout the ongoing training, we had opportunities to be coached by peers, which was really valuable, and to think deeply about yourself. And that was a stretch at times, to go deeply and really think about your own development.
So when you were being coached, what did you learn about yourself?
A lot about work-life balance, actually. That was a big thing. It was one of the key goals that I had with some of the other coachees when we were sort of practicing together. And I'm still working on that now. I think the COVID situation and the enforced kind of working from home it's helped me realize how important it is to break things up. And even though weekdays and weekends, merge together quite a lot right now, I'm appreciating the weekends more. And also productivity. I think productivity and energy levels was something that I really learnt about. And for me, the mornings, I've started to realize the mornings are certainly better for me to be able to do the more difficult work, the work that requires more concentration. And I think that's because my executive brain functions seem to be firing more after a coffee. So I try to do that now in the morning, try to plan my kind of day so that the difficult stuff is done first of all.
Okay. And so how do you transfer that into understanding when somebody that you're coaching, when they're at their best, when their energy levels are the highest, how do you understand that?
Well, it's about having conversations, I think, with people. When you meet a new coachee, you don't know anything about them. They don't know so much about you either. You have an initial conversation, but I think it's having those conversations. There's a number of tools that we can use to help people to reflect on their energy levels, and I think you have to do that. You have to spend some time, maybe looking at a week or two of how you're feeling, a bit like creating a sort of journal or a diary in terms of your energy levels. And once you've got that knowledge, you can then try to practice that and see whether it's working more effectively for you.
And has it made you think differently about doing a large number of coaching sessions in one day?
Yes, it has. I think, in the last couple of years, I've had requests sometimes, which I've taken to work with coachees, maybe from one organization, where you've got, sort of never back to back, because you need time to plan, you need time to reflect, and you need time to write notes up between. But I've certainly run 3 to 4 sessions. And a session for me is usually, it varies, but usually sort of 60 to 90 minutes, usually 90 minutes. And I've run sometimes 3 to 4 in a day, which for some people you might think, well, that's not a lot, if it's only 90 minutes. But actually, it's a huge amount of energy when you're listening, asking questions, making notes afterwards. So yes, I think for quality, I think it's always better. I always say to clients that we need to fit a coaching session in that works best for you, but also best for me as well. So there's got to be some balance so that there's the quality for the interaction.
So true. So going back to the course, Ian, what surprised you about the course?
I think the diversity of the people on the course, actually. We had, HR professionals from large corporate banks, some of the big banks in Singapore, people like myself, sort of trainers. And also, I think there were also individuals who were not at all from the people development field. They'd been coached themselves, maybe, as a coachee, they'd seen the value and they wanted to assist people in the future. So it's kind of like a career change. So a huge amount of diversity. I think sometimes you expect when you go on a certain sort of type of development program, you expect everyone to be from the same kind of field. But it was really refreshing that people were working together from all sorts of different fields, different age groups. And we had people, because Singapore is quite a hub, we had people from across the whole of the kind of, Southeast Asia area. So it was a really, really interesting time.
So having completed the course, what does that tell you about how it fits with your business strategy? So coaching, always an interest for you, a passion for you, but how does that fit with your business strategy?
I think, for us, development work has always been about helping people make positive changes. And coaching is, another great way for that to happen. It's all about, I think what I like, it's all about goals and future actions. And it's really motivating working as a coach with coachees. You can see those changes, maybe not instantaneously, but you can see them as you're working, sort of day by day, week by week. We work a lot with teams already, so we'll continue to offer team coaching. However, I think the ability to work more with individuals on focused programs is really exciting. And in Myanmar, certainly in Myanmar, where we're based at the moment, coaching is relatively new, and we're getting a lot of interest from our current clients. And I think the good thing is that coaching works brilliantly remotely as well, which is especially good in the current situation. So, I'm also working with clients in different parts of the world too. So not just in Myanmar, and it can be done remotely. It can be done telephone, via, an online app, or face-to-face.
So how does coaching fit with your other learning interventions?
Well, we'll continue to work with our customers to run lots of different development programs. However, coaching actually adds an extra dimension. We work with a lot of leadership teams, and coaching can be a great step for individuals to move forward. So we might be working with leadership teams on behaviors, on strategy, but then coaching can be a step for individuals or teams to kind of, look a little bit deeper. And the same with team development programs. we spend a lot of time, helping people and teams to develop their self-awareness. And this is where Prism has been so valuable. And once people understand the impact of their behaviors, both positive and negative, and any sort of gaps that exist, ongoing coaching can help them to set goals and actions to make changes. And I think quite often people, I'm sure you might have the similar kind of feeling, but I think a lot of people sometimes feel that coaching is a completely standalone thing. It's a separate kind of program, but it's not. It's a great add-on to go deeper. So you can, of course, run separate standalone programs, coaching programs, but it can become an add-on for people to develop an even greater level of sort of self-awareness and change.
I think one of the challenges I see when I'm coaching is that coaching isn't always a formal intervention. Mm-hmm. So, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. It's a skill I think that people can use anytime. Coaching, it's a way of being, it's a way of communicating in many ways. And I think it's the same in the business setting. I'm always looking for what I call coachable moments. And I think every leader, but not just leaders, I think anyone can be a coach in a workplace. Whether you're a junior member of staff, mid-level, senior, you can use a coaching style and you can look for these coachable moments. And I think, anyone with practice can adapt that coaching style. Ask more questions. Help people focus on clear goals, listen more. There's always opportunities. And I think so many leaders are now finding ways, to coach and finding that it helps empower people. Unfortunately, I think there's still a tendency for many people in senior positions to jump in with answers. But fortunately, I do think it's changing, which is a good thing.
Really, really interesting. And I think that's so true. The businesses we work in, often fast-moving, fast-paced, and that tendency for the leader to jump in when actually asking some good questions and listening could produce so many more benefits. So sure. Really, really good point. So what have you learned about coaching?
Many things. It's a big journey. I think for me, confidentiality is key. In many ways, it's the number one rule, I think. Without confidentiality, people can't open up and they can't feel safe. So having a clear conversation before any coaching begins, to set out what will and what will not be shared is crucial. And it forms something, we actually call it a chemistry meeting before any coaching program. It's a casual chat, really, to explain what coaching is, also what it isn't, and also to see if there's a good fit between the coachee and the coach. I think that's really important. The coachee has to know whether they can work with that. So the coach needs to know whether they can work for the coachee and vice versa. If there's a good sort of rapport. It's a lot of trust. I've had a number of initial meetings with people where they're simply looking for advice. And to be honest, I've had to say, that coaching isn't about giving advice. So I've suggested they contact a consultant. And it's also, I think, secondly, so confidentiality would be one thing. I think secondly, it's not a one size fits all thing. It's not a kind of off the shelf package, if you like. Although there are specific skills and processes that we follow as coaches, every person and every conversation is different. And, we've also learned how important it is to focus on people who are motivated to make some changes. I think that makes everyone's life easier and you see more positive outcomes. They might not know how to get there yet, but they do know that they want to move and to improve. And I think that's a great starting point.
Indeed. So what more do you think you need to learn?
Well, it's all about gaining experience and practice for me. So, I'll keep working with coachees and enjoying it. I really enjoy coaching. It's very stimulating, motivating. You meet some really interesting characters. At the moment, I'm also working towards a certificate in neuro leadership, which is all about the brain and brain-friendly processes to help people and leaders to lead and manage in a more brain-friendly way. And that really interests me. And the sort of neuroscience part of that forms quite a key component in a lot of our development work now.
And what do you find are some of the hardest challenges for you when you're coaching?
Yeah, I'd like to say none, but that would be a lie, wouldn't it? So, of course, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. So I think every session, every coachee is different. And that can be really tough. You're meeting people, you have that chemistry sort of conversation, that chemistry meeting beforehand. You have a discussion, you establish some rapport, you understand what they're trying to achieve. They understand you and your style. But it can be tough because people come, we're all emotional characters. We come to a coaching conversation in a certain emotional state. And so you can't really plan for what's going to happen in that situation. So that's quite tough. You initially learn a set of skills and processes, but I have to be flexible and go with the flow sometimes, which is tough, but it's incredibly interesting. But lots of unknown. And I think when I first started coaching, I was so focused upon a process. Preparing the right question. I don't know if this is the same with you from your experience, but preparing the right question. But you can't do that. I remember not really listening to what was being said. I was more worried about where I was in the process, that we'd been taught and what the next powerful question would be. I suppose it's the same as learning to drive, really. When you begin and go out for the first time, you're so focused upon the gear changes and the technicalities that you actually forget to look around carefully. But with practice, it all becomes subconscious. Interestingly, I suppose the danger is that you can become too relaxed as a coach if you're not careful. And you end up having some, great flowing conversations, fantastic rapport, but you actually forget that you should be following some goal and action focused sort of process. And I've certainly found that. So I'm more aware of balancing things at the moment, really. I think it's about being present, listening, asking questions that fit with the moment. It's about practice, and I think that's why experience matters. I think another thing is that I think silence is okay sometimes. You don't need to fill silences. That's the moment when the coachee is processing, and they might come up with an insight. And I think, as you said earlier, I think sometimes business environments are so noisy and fast-paced that I think people have forgotten that people need time to think.
Absolutely. I remember when I first started, and like you, I was really focused on the process, and I likened it to playing the piano. So when you first start playing the piano, you're trying to get all the notes in the right order. You're reading the music exactly. You're trying to be really precise following that process. But of course, as you get better, you tend to add a little bit of flair. You tend to play all the right notes, but not necessarily in the right order to coin a phrase. And I think
kind
that's
of using your own style.
Yeah, absolutely. The process is still there. The music's still there, but you're able to really improvise, add to it. And I think that's when coaching becomes really effective. So how do you know when you've been effective as a coach?
Ooh, you got a lot of interesting questions today. I think, one of the key factors in coaching is helping the coachee to set a goal, or not necessarily a goal sometimes. Sometimes goals can be a bit rather too fixed. So sometimes it can be just an intention for each session. So, what would you like to achieve, or what's your intention for the end of this session, and some actions that can be taken forwards afterwards. I think it's crucial, really. And a good coaching conversation always begins with checking in to what the coachee wants to achieve, not what I want to achieve, but what they want to achieve. And it always has to end with some kind of tangible actions, small steps that the coachee will implement that moves them in the direction that they want to go, which creates some accountability. So I think if the goal or the intention is established at the beginning of a coaching conversation, and some of those actions are set before the end of the coaching conversation, you can then know if the session has met their needs. So I think that's one way to be aware of, of how effective your coaching has been. But sometimes you have a coaching conversation and you don't get to where you or the coachee wants to get. And that's just the situation. But that's why really coaching is all about sort of an ongoing process. But it's not a process that goes on forever. Coaching is about setting a series of sessions to work with people on goals, helping them achieve, and then leaving that conversation and letting them then move forward. It's not one of these things that continues and continues and continues for years, or not in my mind. It should be, a set series of sort of sessions to see quicker actions in a way.
Yes. So I don't know if you've come across this situation Ian. But what happens, or how will you react when somebody has done absolutely nothing from one session to the next? So you've set some between you some action points. They've committed to work on them. You get to the next session, and nothing's happened. Yeah. What's your thoughts on that?
It's about, there's always this balance, isn't there? And I've had these conversations with other sort of coaches that say, that the coachee is the one paying for the sessions. You can't challenge them. But coaching is all about challenging. It's about creating the rapport, the trust. And part of that relationship is about challenging. It's about accountability. So, and I've exactly, as you said, I've had that situation a few times where people have come to a session, they haven't, there's two ways. They either haven't managed to achieve any goals because maybe other things have got in the way, and that's fine as long as you can be open and there's trust and honesty there. But there have been situations, of course, where people have either forgotten or they couldn't be bothered. So, part of the coach's job is to challenge and to ask, challenge in a respectful way and to ask questions as to, what's the reason for you not being able to achieve. And it could be that maybe the action that coachee has set was too much of a stretch and they weren't able to. So it's certainly not about kind of just letting it pass, but it's about having a conversation, exploring, where are we now? Where do we want to be? How was the last week or the last 2 weeks or the last month? Whatever the gap is in between. And I think one thing that I always find is setting out a space, enough spacing between sessions so that actually people have an opportunity to focus upon those actions. In my mind, you can't run a coaching session and then say, right, we'll meet tomorrow. Now, you could do, but of course, people don't have time to actually implement any actions. And that's why having a period of time where people can leave, get some insights, reflect, and have more opportunity to put those actions into place is really valuable as well.
Indeed. Definitely. So we mentioned Prism before. So how does Prism fit with your coaching?
Well, actually, I was looking through some certificates the other day, and after our initial conversation about this podcast, and I thought, I'll try and find my Prism Practitioner certificate. And it was actually, I completed it in 2004, which is probably one of the first ever programs I think that was run. And I know Prism has developed. It's grown in many different ways since then. But it fits really well with the neuroscience aspect of our work, which I'm really interested in. And I particularly like using the tool to help people not only understand their behavior preferences, but also, and I think more importantly, is how behavior can and does change over time. You talked about neuroplasticity before. We're always explaining the process of neuroplasticity to people we work with. And it still surprises me. So many people still think that their behavior is fixed. You get to a certain age, your brain is developed and it doesn't grow anymore. But I mean, that's obviously not the case now from research. And what I like about Prism, it's a tool that it doesn't put people into behavioral boxes. So, it's all about where you are at that moment in time. Gaining awareness of your habitual behaviors and looking at the impact that these have on other people. So we often add it into our team and individual coaching programs to help develop, a deeper self-awareness and to look at performance gaps. And it's a really good conversation aid, I think, for coaching to enable people, if they want, to complete a profile, to look at the reports, and it opens up quite a lot of conversation about kind of current behavior and impact and how to change. But as I said, it changes. Your profile, depending on your situation, your profile can and will change depending on the situation. Certainly, we've seen individuals who, from one job to the next, with different stretch in between, their behaviours will change to some extent. So yeah, very very useful tool, especially with coaching.
Good. So last question, Ian, and I think quite a tough question because we're in times of great change. Nobody really understands what this sort of new norm looks like. So how does coaching fit? How does Prism fit in these changing times?
Yeah, I mean the coaching and COVID. I think the COVID situation has certainly led to a lot of uncertainty for most people, certainly for us with our move and other colleagues that I have. There's a lot of lack of clarity to the future. And I think remote learning has brought a lot of changes to the way that teams work and the methods of communication. A lot of our customers are now working remotely. Some are starting to go back to work, either in sort of shifts or not at all. And I think it's caused huge stress for people. And when we're stressed, most of us enter, that threat state where our brain's executive functions just don't work as well. The decision making, the creativity, the emotional intelligence, the communication. And when that happens, we tend to go into some form of autopilot. And we use the behaviors that require less sort of brain energy, the habits. And that's great for survival, but it's not always great for business. So I think coaching and Prism can really help people to understand how they prefer to behave and the impact of this behavior, especially their habitual behaviors, which can come to light when they're more stressed, in a more of a crisis situation. So I think with that greater self-awareness, it allows people to, I suppose, take a breath, step back and change their behavior accordingly. So if you would normally behave in a certain way because it's a habitual behavior, if you were never really self-aware, it allows you to then become aware, slow down and make some changes. And I think coaching also works brilliantly, as we said, remotely. So, there's probably more telephone and web-based coaching than face-to-face. And we use both. I love face-to-face coaching. I also love remote coaching. It depends on the situation. So, it certainly doesn't have to stop when people can't get together. And the good thing is also that, Prism as an online tool also complements this. So people can use it remotely as well.
Your passion for coaching, Ian, really comes across when I talk to you, and I in a way I find that really, really motivating, and I think it's a great passion to have, that belief that people can change and want to change, and you can help them. I think really, really great talking to you and getting that feeling. Really, Thanks. Really positive.
Yeah, it's something that, I think coaching, it's really interesting. It's challenging, but it's really interesting. And as I said right at the beginning, I think it's when you see people making changes, getting insights, getting those sort of aha moments, it just makes it worthwhile. And so hopefully, coaching will grow, and we'll continue to work with some interesting people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Ian. That's been really, really useful and very insightful indeed. So thank you, a really big thank you. And I wish you all the best for the future. None of us are sure
Thanks a lot,
what the future looks like, but all the best, and no doubt we'll talk again in the future. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Alex. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this podcast, brought to you by Prism Brain Mapping, the online behavioural profiling tool for leadership, coaching, recruitment, team building, in fact, anything involving human behaviour. Please see our website, prismbrainmapping.com, for more information.